Right, just make yourself comfortable. And we're still close into the start of the year. So bear that in mind. And also bear in mind, as somebody was commenting about horrible day, that can make you feel quite tired and things like that. It's quite natural for that to happen. So just account for that and what you're doing. Start just rubbing your hands together. And then tapping lightly over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. Then on the other side. Onto your chest. Belly. And your legs. Okay. Settle back in the chair. Letting your weight drop back. So this position is specifically to allow that, because when our legs go out, we do tend to flop back. It's a bit like sitting in a comfy armchair or something like that. And yes, we're going, you might just sort of start to feel very sleepy in this position. It's often when we sort of give ourselves permission to relax, the body's processes just naturally take over. So let your attention come into your body, into your posture in one way or another. And in particular, this feeling of sinking back and how we respond to that. A sort of opening, releasing feeling. There's various terms that we can use to describe it. But really, it's an experiential thing. And the closest I can get to it is if I hold my fist clenched tightly here. I know some of you have heard me do this before, but try it. Clench your fist tightly and you feel everything, it's not just the fingers, but your wrist locks up. You do it for long enough, you'll feel it going up into your arm. It's a very uncomfortable feeling, even if it's not actually actively painful. And then what you do is you just open the fist, let the fingers uncoil to about there. So it's there, wherever there, and this feeling in the palm of your hand, in the muscles of your hands as you do this, your skin and so on and so forth, is the feeling that we're looking for. It isn't this from the clenched fist to a sort of flopping down. That's just if I relax my hand, I go, oh, that's nice and relaxed, but there's nothing happening there. There's a structure, but the nature of the structure has changed from something solid and hard to something a bit more supple, shall we say. So when we're back in the chair, we can start that process by focusing on those areas that are in direct contact with the chair. And if we can, just imagine that feeling, have the intent that that's what's going to happen in the area. And you won't always get an immediate result from that, but if you keep practicing in this way, if you develop that ability to create sensation, to create change in your body through your intent, it does start to get more straightforward. I won't say easier, but it gets to be more straightforward. And then of course, that feeling can spread through the rest of your body. Coming to the upright position, we do the same thing again. So this is a constant process in Tai Chi. It's like breathing in and breathing out. You don't just do it once. And so we want this running, almost like we're all sitting at some kind of computer. All these computers have programs, things that are happening in the background. We don't see them happening, but if they didn't happen, then something would go wrong. And in a way, this idea of releasing, shall we call it, it's something that's constantly with us. And whenever we meet a barrier, whenever we meet some kind of resistance for whatever reason, this is going to be part of the response. It may not be the whole response, but it's going to be part of it. So just slowly turning your head. So what this does is encourage this release of tightness and stiffness very subtly in our body. When we start off doing Tai Chi, we learn, maybe we learn to relax our hips and knees, maybe our shoulders, so on and so forth, to just get the release of tension in those areas. And we find that although that works well, we can often feel quite good about it. It's not the end of the process. It's almost like as our awareness goes deeper, we become aware of deeper and deeper sense of holding. And so when we meet that, say for instance, when you're turning your head, here you will reach a point of resistance. It might be that you can release a little bit and get a little bit more space, or it might not. You might have reached, there will always be a limit to that. And what we don't want to do at any point really is to push against that limit. We yield to it in Tai Chi terms. In some instances, we will find that that range of movement slowly increases in the ways that I've described before. But for instance here, I think I'll probably get about as much movement as I can do in the turning of my head without putting pressure on the side of my neck. Sooner or later, the sheer physical structure is going to cause that to happen. And then here, hands in front of your shoulders. So as well as being good exercises in their own right, these opening set of movements, softening the joints, releasing the joints, feeling, for instance, with this one, the connections between this movement of our elbows and what's happening in our chest and our upper back. But they're also good exercises because they're quite simple to see if we can just make this releasing quality become more natural to us, more automatic, going forwards. And then winding around. So this is a process that really helps to expand our range of movement, how far we're able to move, not by straining. And there is always a place for doing some stretching and things like that, but it's not what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is to find ways to remove the barriers to movement. And then winding all the way around. So this is where the term cultivation can be helpful. If you planted something in your garden and it's just beginning to grow up, but you look at it one day and it's surrounded by weeds, you don't sort of grab hold of the plant that is just starting to grow and kind of pull and tug at it to try and make it bigger. What you do is you remove the weeds, you remove the barriers to that plant's growth. And then back the other way. And resting on your legs and easing forwards and pushing back. So here, for instance, if you want to go further, and again, there will be a limit, otherwise, sooner or later you'll fall out of the chair. One of those might be a resistance in your legs to more weight going in. Maybe if you've got a tight knee, it's getting tighter. And can we just reverse that process. It might be in your back because there's an extension through your back and your spine and so on. So these exercises, this opening set of movements become a way of weeding, clearing out the barriers to movement. Turn a little bit. So more of your weight going into one leg. As we become aware of the space that we cultivate within our body, also aware that the movement itself, it's almost like water flowing into that space, not straining against the barriers, but that in itself becomes part of the process of kind of dissolving away the barriers of water that drains down a slope into a puddle. If it keeps going on, if it keeps happening, eventually the puddle will get bigger. And then in the other direction. Then around. Back the other way. Back to the center. And then stepping out, open your leg, expand and open. You want to be able to get your foot firmly down on the floor in front of you. On the other side, that's never going to be a long step from this position, but again, through that opening, through that releasing feeling, we can get a little bit more extension and still feel that contact with the ground. And then back. So then when we come to the main body of exercises, in a way we want to just allow those processes to happen. I would say that what I've been talking about are almost the equivalent of a musician tuning their instrument, playing the scales and so on and so forth. The things that they want to have in place before they start to play. And the problem is always going to be, of course, if we think too much about what I've just been talking about, then it's quite hard to really focus on what can be times quite complex exercises. So we may want to remind ourselves of them, but once you've established them, quite often just remembering the term soften, that may trigger the process, or releasing or letting go, whatever term works for you. So now, bird folds its wings. Next time from the forward position, change into fisherman castanet. Now your arms slightly delayed as they come through. The image of moving through water can help here. Just imagine somebody, they lightly takes hold of your fingers. You sit back and fingers slide out of their grip and then come through. Don't overdo that, but just get that sense of the movement. Your weight moves from feet to hips or hips to feet. That means that your shoulders move. And if your shoulders move, then your arms will follow, which is quite a different feel to the temptation to move your arms first. So the phrase that sums that up is the one from the old writings: movement is rooted in the feet, because the prelude to all of this is always that releasing that allows us to sink down, allows our center of gravity to drop. It's very difficult to let your arms flow freely if your center of gravity is up in your shoulders and your back and your shoulders are tight. That will impact your arms. Transmitted through your legs, and that refers partly to what we're experiencing now, which is the transfer of weight, controlled, guided, shaped by the center of the body. Your pelvis in the center of your body is rolling forwards, and that is what brings your shoulders forwards, and then expressed in your arms. Just be aware of those areas that do feel tight or stiff, maybe even areas that feel a little bit painful. See if that releasing quality works in those areas. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. Don't feel that you somehow failed if it doesn't seem to make a difference. And maybe other things that we need to bring in to actually get that feeling of release. And then rolling the ball in. Sometimes a different exercise may be more effective in helping that feeling of release. We begin to realize that, as I said again many times, each movement has a lot in common with all of the movements, but also its own distinctive qualities. There's these sort of resonances, these echoes of the movement within the body. So we gradually begin to understand how a particular movement might be useful to us in one way or another. And then vision spreads its wings. and pushing away. Then punch with both hands. And what we're going to do, we're going to go back next time to pigeon spreads its wings and do the last three exercises in a sequence. So open your fingers, pigeon spreads its wings, your elbows go out a long way, and then draw your fingers out. And then your elbows start to come in and draw your fingers in. This time, your hands stay in the same position relative to your shoulders, but your elbows still go out. And then you drop the heel of your palm down and press forwards. And then your hands come down. And this time, your elbows don't go out. They just come back to your hip, but your arm rotates. And you go forwards. And now you go back to pigeon spreads its wings. So here we feel a big opening through belly, chest, and as we go forwards to our back. Here we feel that opening still, but the expression of it is so much narrower space. And then again, the opening is there in the rotation, but again, we've added in this sort of spring-like quality in the arms. We go back. So this, you can imagine you had a ball there, you were squeezing on it, quite a strong feeling. Here, that sense of squeezing is less about, that energy is less about squeezing the ball than it is pushing it forwards. And here, again, we're going to push it forwards, but much more directed, much more precise. You're aiming at a particular point or two particular points on that ball. We start to get quite different effects through our body and movements that can look very different, but actually the changes are very small. It doesn't have to be a big change in the right place to produce a significant difference, if you like, externally. It starts to help us understand the significance of small movements, small changes within the body. But in the right place at the right time, we can end up with quite different outcomes when we make those changes. Again, the phrase from the classics is 4 ounces overcomes 1,000 pounds. Just do this one more time. That principle can be applied from one exercise to another, or from one part of an exercise to another. So now open your fingers and change into the winding out movement. all of this is related to this gathering of our attention into our body. The more we notice these small changes from one movement to another and so on, the deeper our attention will go into our body. And associated with that is a deepening quietness and calmness for our minds. So the awareness of how we produce the movements from within the body has implications and benefits for both mind and body. Changing to polishing the table. One more time. Bringing your hands back, turning the palm up, pushing up, a gentle press down through the feet and your hips. It's one way of thinking of this. So you might do that if you're going to stand up. It's a fraction of the effort to stand up, just enough to get that sense of a movement up your back, your head going up slightly. Just be careful when you do that, because you don't want to strain in your back. Another way of looking at this is as you go down, there's a compression here, as though there's a ball there that's being squeezed. And then the ball expands. So the ball will expand in all directions, but in particular, note that when the ball expands, there's a downward movement and an upward movement. The downward movement pushes down through your hips and through your feet, of course. This becomes significant when we stand. The upward movement causes that movement and expansion up through your body that moves your arms. Just remind yourself of the starting point when we were sitting back, just beginning that process of releasing. And then change into the wild goose. And ease forwards. parting the clouds. So what this means is, if we want to make a change, we want to do a particular movement, want to make some kind of change in our movements, in our posture, sometimes that can seem like a big task. But the more we understand how these things work, what goes on within body and mind, then, or between body and mind, that might be a better way of thinking of it, the more we realize that we can initiate a change in our posture, say, for instance, so if we want to root down better, not by making a strained effort, but by just finding those small areas where we can bring about a small change that builds into the bigger change. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Good. And then pushing in two directions. Extend one foot. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then your hands fisted, made a loose fist and grasping the tiger's ears. Both sides. and grasping the tiger's ears. Now, part in the wild horse's mane, this is more complex. And so the encouragement is to focus on the small details, one movement at a time, rather than thinking, oh, I don't know what's going on. Bring your weight back into your right hip. Hold the ball with your right hand on top. Move forwards to your left leg. Feel your shoulder moving forwards. Your body turns, swinging the arm out. Your right hand just goes down. Now, when we come back, we realize actually the hands don't do anything. It's all in the body. Turn your hands in to hold the ball, move across into your left hip, and then forwards into your right leg, and turn in shoulder, elbow, and then the hand itself. Being pushed forwards and out by the movement of your weight and the turn in your center. Remember to just be aware of the change in your weight. Most of your weight in your right hip. Moving forwards to your left leg. Back into your right hip. Cross to your left hip. Forwards into your right leg. Back into your left hip. Back across to your right hip. Back, starting the whole cycle over again. One more on each side. And just like a hand twist. And then open your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. On the other side. Upper part of the chest. Light on your belly. And then release. Get your legs stretched, and then pushing your heels up. And circling your knees around. Change direction. Okay. And then standing. You always leave the chair there for. I'm going to move my chair because I've got a wall behind me. B, it's going to get in my way. But some of these ideas are quite helpful as always to have some support to play around with them. So the good news is to do something that at first sight looks quite difficult. Actually, we can build it up bit by bit. We, just by making these small changes, and if we're patient and aware enough, we'll be able to get there. The downside of that, the bad news, if you like, is it doesn't take much to go wrong. So there's a requirement to be more and more precise in our postures and our movements. So try and get the basic posture right. Feet below your hips, toes pointing forwards. This needs to feel comfortable. So hip width can be measured from the outside of your foot, giving you this slightly narrower stance. This isn't comfortable for me. I feel as though I'm constricting my lower back. You can do it from the midline of the foot. This feels a little bit better for me, but not quite there. Or you can go from the inside of your foot. And this works better for me. I know what I'm looking for. I know what I'm trying to feel. And I have this little leeway. I can make these little adjustments. They're not set in stone. At some different point, it might work differently for me. But for the moment, this is what I'm looking for. I want my weight a little bit forwards in my feet and my hips just to drop back. This change is very, very slight from here to here, or from this to this. But it's incredibly important for the body. It's the change that helps to reduce the tightness, to allow that sense of releasing, softening, particularly in the upper part of the body. It's the change that gives us more stability. That also helps with that softening. So, again, quite a small thing physically from here to here. You can barely notice it, and yet when you're aware of what's going on in your body, you realize just how much difference it will make. Let's do the exercises, rooting down, wild goose, parting the clouds, as a little sequence, and in the same way as we did with the earlier little set of movements that we did. Just notice what you need to do to move from one movement to another. What happens within the body. I'm not just talking about the arms, I'm talking about what happens in those regions of the body directly connected to the movements. So, rooting down. The wild goose. And parting the clouds. Back to rooting down. And when you do rooting down, just be aware of the expansion in your belly, lower back. And then into the wild goose, belly and lower back, and then up towards solar plexus, the expansion, just pushing your arms out further. And then belly, solar plexus, and up into your chest. One more round. One foot forwards. As we get more used to what is possible within this stance, within the whole art, that we realise that just a slight thing out can make a difference. My foot's like this, that makes a difference. If I'm too narrow, too short, too long, it makes a difference. So when we feel doesn't feel quite right, actually a good starting point is actually just check your posture. If nothing else, what that does is it creates a pathway in for your attention. When you go forward, 60% in your front foot, 70% in your back foot. But the movements that follow on from this posture, that awareness of the transition from what we call full to empty, and to be able to distinguish between the full leg, the one with the maximum amount of weight, the empty leg, is again absolute key to developing the movements. And then we raising toes and heel. I always have my front foot turned slightly out here. I find it makes it easier to get more of my weight going down through that front leg. But I don't want it out here, because when I'm out here now, I'm changing direction. A little change like this doesn't significantly change the direction of the movement. But the bigger the turn, the bigger the change, the bigger the effect. Stepping in. The thing that may have you, excuse me, that may have you wobbling around might just be a bit of stiffness in your knee, the hip. Might just be a tendency to, when you get to here, to do this. It doesn't take much. It's like if you've got a set of scales in your kitchen and you're baking a cake or something like that. It's very easy to put too much flour in. Oops, too much. You have to spoon it out, and so on and so forth. On the other side. Raising the toes and your heel. Then stepping in. Take a few steps through. And then change direction. Right foot forwards. Fisherman casting net. On the side, I'm exaggerating slightly, but you can see my hand goes up a little bit, drops down, goes up a little bit. So there's a curve there. You could almost imagine that you could do this in a full circle. It's not what we're doing, but you know, you've got a part of a circle there. You're facing forwards. But now, to change, you turn so you're facing diagonally. And then you also just turn your hand a little bit. Neither are complicated movements. You've still got that arc, that part of a circle. So it's a relatively simple matter just to let that continue. And we go into the figure of 8 movement, the infinity sign movement. Retaining a quiet quality in our arms, moving your weight, turning. Remember, changes that brought you to this point. Then change sides. Remember how we start the class? You know, sitting back in the chair. Each stage that has brought us to this point is relatively straightforward. And yet, you know, by the time we get to doing that last exercise, it can seem unbearably complicated. And that's often because those changes, those small changes aren't embodied. But it's also, they might be there, but the focus of our attention may be too much on our arms and our hands, and that will block the effect of those changes. Turning. Just as our intent can help us to produce the movement, if it's correct, and if our intent is wrong, if the focus of our attention is incorrect, it can block the process as well. Turn over. Turn your front foot out a little bit if that helps you with the step in and step through. And then, once again, changing direction. One more time. Lovely. Shake it. Go back to your chairs. So the development, if you like to think of it in that way, is in both mind and body. One of the things I find when I'm teaching, and you know, when I'm teaching, obviously my attention is going to be on the class, and there's sometimes about, you know, how I'm developing an idea or something like that. And I found sometimes I'm doing one movement, and I'm you know, for the class's sake, I'm going to do a particular movement or something like that. But then you know, if I'm not careful, I start to think, oh yeah, this could also be that movement, or could bring about this change. And if it's not appropriate for the class, suddenly I can find my body starts to do it. And it was no, it wasn't an instruction, it was just an idea. I'm going to shelve the idea and actually stay on course. So you know, it does, in a way, as we develop this, if you like, mind-body connection, if you want to think of it in that way, as body and mind become more responsive to each other, it's a very positive thing. But it does mean that actually, if we do lose that focus of attention, which is something that happens all the time, if we don't get it back, then we can easily go astray. I remember once. I know in a number of sequences of movements, and I remember once starting off on one sequence, and as I went into it, I was aware that there was sort of like, oh, you know, there's a crossover, there's a similarity. My attention just drifted slightly, and I went into a second sequence, and I was thinking, well, this is no good. And as I was thinking, I thought, if I'm not careful, I'll end up doing a third sequence. And suddenly I was doing that third sequence. Well, this is hopeless. Don't even think about anything. I had to stop and start again, decide which particular set of movements I wanted to do, and not start thinking about how they related to other sets of movements. It's useful to do that, but not while you're actually doing the movements, I found. So yeah, these things always have pluses and minuses. I mean, that was quite an amusing incident. It was like, okay, where was my attention? What am I going to do here? Which particular form do I want to practice at this point? So let's let your hands drop down, embrace tiger, return to the mountain. And as always, it's an unreasonable expectation that we're going to maintain all of these qualities the whole time. And in fact, I'm not even sure that it's a desirable thing, because we'd have to spend all our time focusing on what's happening within our body, and we'd have to block out the outside world. And you know, some people do this. You know, sometimes people are almost it's almost like they're in a kind of monastery or on a retreat or something like that. But I've always thought of Tai Chi as an art that enables us to, if you like, embrace the tiger, do work with what's out there. It was just that reminder that we come back on a regular basis. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Just open your eyes. That went very, very quickly. Everything seems to be going great today. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along and joining in.
Thank you.
See how you get on.